The gun was warm in Jessica Phillips' hand, still hot from the 3 shots she just fired into the ceiling of Ricardo Mazzani's penthouse office. Around her, 7 armed men stood frozen, weapons half drawn, uncertain whether to shoot the woman who just walked through their security like smoke through a screen door. Ricardo himself sat behind his massive mahogany desk, hands raised, not in surrender, but in something closer to reverence. Blood trickled from a cut on his cheek where a piece of falling plaster had struck him. His dark eyes, the same eyes that stared back at her every time she looked at their 2-year-old daughter, were wide with something Jessica had never seen before. Fear, not of the gun, of her. "Jessica," he said quietly, his voice that familiar gravel-and silk rasp that once made her stomach flip. "Cara mia, put down the—" "Don't." The word came out cold. Absolute. "Don't you dare cara mia me. You don't get to call me beloved. You don't get to use that voice that makes people forget you're a monster." She stepped forward, glass crunching under her boots. Designer boots, Valentino, bought with money she'd earned herself. The gun never wavered. "You want to know why I'm here? You sent 12 men to my house, Ricardo. 12. To take Sophia from me. To protect her," he insisted, still not lowering his hands. "The Volkovs are planning something, and I needed—" "You needed—" Jessica laughed, and the sound made his men shift uncomfortably. It was not a sane laugh. "Everything is about what you need, what you want, what you're afraid of. But you never asked what I need, what Sophia needs. So let me tell you a story, Ricardo. Let me tell you how a nursing student who could barely afford rent became the woman standing in front of you with enough evidence to put you in prison for 3 consecutive life sentences. Let me tell you how the girl you abandoned while pregnant learned to shoot well enough to put 3 rounds through your ceiling without hitting a single person, even though I could have, even though part of me wanted to." She lowered the gun, not holstering it, just letting it hang at her side, fingers still on the trigger guard. "But to understand how I became this person, we need to go back. Back to the night you walked into my life and destroyed everything I thought I knew about myself." Ricardo's eyes never left her face. "Jess, shut up. For once in your life, Ricardo Mazzani, shut up and listen." The only sound was the hum of the city 20 floors below, Chicago's heartbeat pulsing through bulletproof glass. Before we continue with Jessica's story, can I ask you something? I spend 15 to 20 hours researching, writing, and perfecting each story for you. That's nearly a full week of work to create these cinematic experiences completely free. While you're here enjoying this story, YouTube only shows it to a tiny fraction of people unless you take just 2 seconds to hit subscribe. Here's the thing. If just half of you watching right now subscribed, this channel would explode, and I could create even deeper, more complex stories for you every single week. But only about 3% of viewers are subscribed. That means 97% of you are enjoying hours of content, but haven't taken that tiny step. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for a single click that tells YouTube, show this to more people. So here's my request. If you're enjoying Jessica's story so far, click subscribe. It takes 2 seconds and means everything to this channel's survival. Also, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing this global community we're building. Last video, we had viewers from 47 different countries. Now, let's get back to the story, because what happens next changes everything for Jessica. 8 months earlier, Jessica had been wiping down the bar at Sapphire when Ricardo first walked in. She'd been in Chicago for 3 years by then, working 3 jobs to pay for nursing school, living in a studio apartment where the radiator clanged like prisoners escaping and the neighbors fought loud enough to shake walls. She was tired, bone deep, soul tired, the kind of exhaustion that makes you wonder if you'll ever feel rested again. Then Ricardo Mazzani sat down at her bar, and every instinct she'd honed growing up in foster care, the ones that screamed danger, predator, run, lit up like Christmas lights. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful. Sharp edges and dark eyes, and the kind of presence that made the air thick. 3 men flanked him, hands inside their jackets where Jessica and new guns lived. Everyone in Chicago knew who Ricardo Mazzani was. The king of the Italian South Side. The man who'd taken over his father's empire at 23 and expanded it into something that made the old bosses look like corner dealers. "McAllen," he said. "Neat." Jessica poured with steady hands, a skill learned from years of not showing fear to people who fed on it. When she set the glass down, their fingers brushed, just for a second, but she felt it like voltage. "You're not afraid," he observed. "I'm terrified," she corrected. "I'm just good at hiding it." That made him smile. Genuine. Unexpected. Honesty. How refreshing. He came back every night for a week. Sat at the same stool. Ordered the same drink. Left $100 tips on $15 tabs. On the 8th night, he asked her to dinner. Jessica said no. Why? He seemed genuinely curious, not offended. "Because men like you don't date women like me. They use them. And I've been used enough for one lifetime." Ricardo leaned forward, close enough that she could smell cedar and whiskey and something darker underneath. "What if I told you I have no interest in using you? What if I just want to know the woman who looks at me like I'm a man instead of a myth?" "Then I'd say you're a liar," Jessica replied. "But I'd probably go to dinner anyway, because I'm apparently terrible at self-preservation." The dinner turned into 2, then 5, then nights at his apartment. Not the penthouse where he conducted business, but a smaller place in Lincoln Park with floor-to-ceiling windows and a piano he claimed he didn't know how to play. He did, though. Jessica caught him once at 2 a.m., playing Chopin like a man confessing sins. "My mother taught me," he admitted when she stood in the doorway, watching, "before my father killed her for trying to leave." That was the first crack in his armor, the first glimpse of the boy underneath the monster. They fell into something Jessica couldn't name. Not quite a relationship. Ricardo insisted they keep it secret, keep her separate from his world. "The people who want to hurt me would use you," he said, cupping her face like she was made of something precious. "I need you safe, untouched by what I do." She should have heard the warning bells, should have recognized the pattern of a man who compartmentalized love because he didn't know how to integrate it. But she was 24 and lonely and tired of being strong all the time. And Ricardo made her feel like she could rest. For 3 months, they existed in that bubble. Secret dinners and stolen nights and conversations that lasted until dawn. Ricardo told her about the empire he didn't want but couldn't escape. She told him about foster homes where love was transactional and safety was never guaranteed. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he said one night, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "You've survived things that would have broken me. You've killed people," Jessica pointed out. "That doesn't require strength. That requires shutting off the parts of yourself that feel. You feel everything and survive anyway. That's real strength." She got pregnant in month 4. Found out on a Tuesday in a campus bathroom, staring at 2 pink lines that rewrote her entire future. She called Ricardo 7 times. He didn't answer. Finally texted, "Busy. Tomorrow." Tomorrow came. He showed up at her apartment, looking exhausted, shadows under his eyes, shirt untucked. She didn't waste time. "I'm pregnant." The words hit him like bullets. She watched him process, watched something shudder behind his eyes. "How far along?" 6 weeks, maybe. "And you're sure it's—" "Don't." Jessica's voice went cold. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." He poured himself whiskey from the bottle he kept in her cabinet, drank it in one swallow. "This is a complication I don't need right now." Complication. Their child was a complication. "What does that mean?" she asked, even though she already knew. "It means I'm in the middle of a war with the Volkov family. It means federal investigators are building a RICO case. It means I don't have the bandwidth for her." "For what?" "For me? For your child. For a mistake." The word landed like a fist to the stomach. Jessica couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this man she'd loved and realize she'd never known him at all. Ricardo pulled an envelope from his jacket, set on her counter. "There's $10,000. Enough for a procedure and a fresh start. Somewhere not Chicago. You want me to get an abortion and disappear. I want you to be smart." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "You know what I am, what I do. You bring a child into this world. You paint a target on both your backs. This is mercy, Jessica. Mercy." She laughed, ugly and sharp. "You're abandoning your child and calling it mercy. I'm giving you an out before you're in too deep. I'm already in too deep. She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. I'm carrying your baby, Ricardo. Our baby. And you're acting like it's a business problem to solve. Everything in my life is a business problem. His voice went flat. Empty. I told you to stay separate. I told you my world was dangerous. This is what happens when boundaries break. Then maybe you shouldn't have broken them. Jessica grabbed the envelope and threw it at him. Cash scattered like confetti. Get out. Take your blood money and get out of my apartment. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw regret flicker across his features. Just for a second. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask he wore for everyone else. You have 48 hours to reconsider, he said. After that, I can't protect you. I never asked you to protect me. He left. The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed in Jessica's bones. She stood in her tiny apartment surrounded by scattered bills and shattered dreams and felt something harden in her chest. Something that tasted like survival and fury mixed together. She didn't take his offer, didn't get the abortion, didn't leave Chicago. Instead, she did what she'd always done. She survived. Picked up a fourth job, applied for assistance programs, went to prenatal appointments at the free clinic alone, built a life out of spite and determination. The baby was a girl. Jessica found out at 18 weeks, sitting in an examination room with peeling paint and fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. A daughter. She was going to have a daughter. She wanted to call Ricardo, wanted to tell him they'd made a girl together, that she was healthy and strong and already loved beyond measure. But she didn't, because he'd made his choice. At 20 weeks, everything changed. Jessica was leaving her shift at the hospital where she worked as a nursing assistant when she noticed the car. Black Mercedes, tinted windows, idling across the street. Her skin prickled. Instinct honed from years of being hunted by caseworkers and creeps and danger wearing friendly faces. She walked faster. The Mercedes followed. Left turn. It turned left. Right turn. It turned right. Jessica pulled into a 24-hour grocery store, bright and crowded and safe. The Mercedes parked 3 spaces down. A man got out. Silver hair. Scar across his throat, like someone had tried and failed to kill him. He walked toward her car with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Jessica cracked her window 1 inch. Can I help you? Jessica Phillips. His accent was thick. Russian. You're carrying Ricardo Matsani's child. Ice flooded her veins. I don't know what you're talking about. You're a terrible liar. He smiled, showing gold teeth. Tell Ricardo that Dmitry Volkov sends his regards. And tell him we know about the baby. He walked away, got in his Mercedes, drove off. Jessica sat shaking in her car. One hand pressed to her belly where her daughter tumbled and kicked, blissfully unaware that she'd just become a target. She called Ricardo. He answered on the first ring. Jessica. Just her name, but she heard fear underneath. They know, she said. I know. You know. Her voice cracked. They approached me in a parking lot, Ricardo. They know about the baby. Where are you? Outside a grocery store on. Don't go home. Drive to the Marriott on Michigan Avenue. Room 847. 20 minutes. He hung up. Every rational cell in Jessica's brain screamed trap. Screamed run. Screamed call the police and disappear and protect her daughter at any cost. But she drove to the Marriott anyway, because somewhere underneath the anger and betrayal, she still believed Ricardo would protect them. She was such a fool. Room 847. She knocked. Ricardo opened the door, and for a second they just stared at each other. He looked terrible. Thinner. Exhausted. Haunted. His eyes dropped to her stomach, to the unmistakable swell of 20 weeks pregnant, and something cracked in his expression. Come in, he said quietly. The room was corporate nice. King bed. City view. Smell of expensive cologne and desperation. Ricardo gestured to the chair, but Jessica stayed standing. How did they find out? She demanded. I don't know. He paced like a caged animal. I've been careful. No one in my organization knows except Dino, and he'd die before he betrayed me. Maybe someone followed you. I haven't seen you in 2 months, Jessica. I stayed away to keep you safe, and they still found you. The words hit her like a slap. You stayed away to keep me safe? Yes. Not because you didn't want us anymore. I've never stopped wanting you. He stopped pacing, looked at her with raw honesty. But wanting you doesn't make you safe. It makes you a target. And I can't. It's a girl, Jessica interrupted. Ricardo froze. What? Our baby. She's a girl. Jessica pressed a hand to her stomach. Healthy. Strong. Due in October. I thought you'd want to know. Something broke in his face. Just shattered. A daughter. Yes. Jessica. He ran his hands through his hair. A gesture she remembered from late nights when the mask slipped. I've handled this all wrong. I was scared, and I push you away because that's what I do. I destroy things before they can destroy me. But the Volkovs finding you means distance doesn't matter. They'll use you whether we're together or not. So what do you want me to do? Let me protect you. He stepped closer, and she smelled cedar and whiskey and regret. Move into one of my properties. Let me assign security. Let me keep you and our daughter safe. In exchange for what? Nothing. No strings. His voice cracked. You don't have to see me or acknowledge I exist. I just need to know you're both alive. Jessica wanted to say no, wanted to tell him to burn in hell and storm out dramatically. But she thought about Dmitry Volkov's gold teeth and the promise in his smile. Thought about her daughter, helpless and depending on Jessica's choices. One condition, she said. Anything. You don't get to play father when it's convenient. Either you're in this, really in this, or you stay gone forever. Ricardo looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. Fear of commitment versus fear of loss. I'll try, he said finally. I don't know how to be a father. Mine was a monster, but I'll try if you'll let me. She should have said no, should have seen the red flags. But she was 20 weeks pregnant and terrified and so tired of doing everything alone. Okay, she whispered. Within hours, Jessica was living in a penthouse on Lakeshore Drive with security outside her door and rules that felt like prison bars. Don't leave without guards. Don't tell anyone where you are. Don't trust anyone Ricardo hasn't vetted. But it was safe. For a while. Ricardo visited 3 times a week. Awkward. Formal. Asking about appointments and bringing groceries she didn't request. He assembled a crib one night, fumbling with instructions like they were written in code. You don't have to do this, Jessica said, watching him struggle. I want to. He looked up at her, and his expression was raw. I'm terrified, Jessica. I've killed men without hesitation, built an empire on blood. But the thought of being responsible for a tiny person who'll look to me for answers, that scares me more than anything. Then why try? Because she's half you. He went back to the crib, tightening bolts too hard. And you're the best person I've ever known. They built something fragile over the next 3 months. Not quite a relationship, not quite a family, but something. He came to appointments, held her hand during ultrasounds when their daughter kicked, brought dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Jessica started to believe they might actually survive this. Then, at 28 weeks, she woke to cramping. Sharp. Wrong. When she turned on the bathroom light, she saw blood. She screamed for the guards. They burst in, guns drawn, expecting attackers. Hospital, she gasped. Now. The ride was a blur. Chicago lights streaking past. Tony calling Ricardo. Jessica pressing her hands to her belly and begging her daughter to hold on. Please hold on. Mama's got you. They pulled up to Northwestern Memorial. Tony tried to explain about insurance while Jessica bled onto pristine floors. He pulled out a wad of cash, thousands of dollars, and slapped it on the counter. Does this cover it? The nurse's expression shifted from annoyed to alarmed. Security started moving toward them. Too much attention. Too much wrong. We need to go, Sal said urgently. I need a doctor. Jessica screamed. One came running, took one look, and called for a wheelchair. They rushed her back to examination rooms while Tony argued with security about the gun someone had spotted. Jessica heard shouting. Someone calling the police. This is Ricardo's world, she thought. This is what it means to love a monster. When it mattered most, his world made everything worse. The ultrasound showed placental abruption. The placenta separating from her uterus. Fatal if untreated. Emergency C-section, the doctor said. Your baby needs to come out now. She's too early. She won't survive if we don't operate. They were prepping Jessica for surgery when Ricardo burst through the doors. wild with fear. Jessica, sir, you can't be in here. That's my daughter. That's my... He stopped, seeing the blood, seeing the monitors showing distress. I'm scared, Jessica whispered. He grabbed her hand. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You're going to be fine. She's going to be fine. You don't know that. I know I'll burn the world if you're not. They wheeled her towards surgery. Ricardo tried to follow, but security stopped him. The same security Tony had antagonized. Let him come, Jessica begged. Please. But they pulled her away through double doors into bright lights and cold air. The last thing she saw was Ricardo fighting against guards, screaming her name. They put her under. When Jessica woke, a nurse was talking about miracles. Your daughter is in the NICU. 2 pounds, 6 ounces. Breathing on her own. The doctors are amazed. Where's Ricardo? The nurse's expression changed. Became careful. The man who came with you was arrested. Something about illegal weapons. Ricardo was in jail. Their daughter was in the NICU. Jessica was alone again. She started crying and couldn't stop. The nurse sedated her. When she woke again, a different man sat beside her bed. Not Ricardo. Someone with Ricardo's eyes, but a softer face. I'm Dino, he said quietly. Ricardo's brother. I'm so sorry. Where is he? Being processed. He'll be out tomorrow. But Jessica. Dino leaned forward, and she saw genuine sadness. He thinks you and the baby are safer without him. He's planning to let you go. Set you up financially, but stay gone. The betrayal was physical. A knife to the chest. He's leaving us again. He thinks he's saving you. By abandoning us. Jessica's voice rose. My daughter is fighting for her life. And he's going to walk away? He's trying to. I don't care what he's trying to do. She was shaking with rage. Either he's a father or he's not. Tell him I don't want his money. I want him to choose us for once in his goddamn life. When Jessica was stable enough, they wheeled her to the NICU. Her daughter lay in an incubator, tinier than seemed possible, covered in tubes and wires. But breathing, fighting, surviving. She's a warrior, the nurse said. Like her mama. Jessica reached through the incubator holes and touched her daughter's hand. So small, so perfect. The baby wrapped tiny fingers around Jessica's, and something inside her crystallized into steel. Your daddy is a coward, she whispered. But you won't be. I'll teach you to fight, to survive, to never let anyone make you feel like you're too much trouble. Ricardo came once while Jessica slept. The nurses said he sat by the incubator for hours, crying, talking to their daughter in Italian. He left a letter. Jessica, you're right to call me a coward. I can't face the fear of failing you both. As long as you're connected to me, you're in danger. I'm setting up a trust fund, $5 million. Signing over the apartment. Arranging security that won't look like security. You'll never see me again, but you'll never struggle either. Tell our daughter her father loved her too much to ruin her life. R. Jessica read it 3 times. Then called Dino. Tell your brother he gets one choice. Be a father or be a stranger. No in between. No money without presence. Either he's all in or he stays gone forever. Ricardo never came back. Jessica was discharged after a week. Moved into a Ronald McDonald house because she refused Ricardo's apartment. Her daughter, she named her Sophia, Wisdom, spent 3 weeks in the NICU before coming home. Still tiny but healthy. Breathing. Surviving. Jessica took her to a 1-bedroom apartment furnished with second-hand furniture and determination. Dino tried to give her money. She refused. She cut every tie to Ricardo's world and built her own. It was brutal. She dropped out of nursing school. Worked from home, doing medical transcription while Sophia slept. Applied for assistance. Survived hour by hour, feeding by feeding. Sophia was 3 months old when Ricardo showed up at her door, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Jessica, please. Just listen. No. She started closing the door. He put his hand against it. Not forcing, just stopping. The Volkovs are escalating. There was an attempt on Dino's life. They're coming for everyone I love, and you have no protection. They will find you, Jessica, and when they do, then I'll handle it. Ow! He looked past her at the cramped apartment, the second-hand furniture, the pack, in play where Sophia slept. How will you handle trained killers? The same way I've handled everything else you've thrown at me. By surviving. I need you safe. His composure cracked. I need to know my cowardice hasn't cost you everything. It already did. It cost Sophia a father. It cost me the man I loved. It cost us the family we could have been. Then let me fix it, he begged. Let me be the father I should have been. You can't fix abandonment by showing up when it's convenient. Jessica was shaking. You don't get to walk away because things are scary and come back when you feel guilty. Sophia needed you in the NICU. She needed you every 3 a.m. feeding, every doctor's appointment, every moment when I didn't know if I was doing anything right. And you weren't there. I know, and I hate myself for it. But I'm here now. I'm begging for one more chance. Why now? Because I'm in love with you. The words exploded out, raw and desperate. Because I think about you every second. Because the thought of going one more day without you both is killing me in ways bullets never could. Jessica stood there, Sophia sleeping peacefully inside, this broken man on her doorstep offering everything 3 months too late. Loving us isn't enough, she said quietly, because love without action is just words. And I've had enough of your words. She closed the door, locked it, slid to the floor while he stood on the other side, saying her name like a prayer. He left, but not far. The next morning, an envelope appeared under her door. $10,000 and a note for Sophia. I won't insult you by saying it fixes anything, but please use it for what she needs. Or, Jessica burned the note. Used the money for debt and groceries. Ricardo came back the next day with a car seat. The one you have is expired. This is the safest model. Ricardo, I'm not asking for anything except to let me do this. Let me give her things she needs. She needs a father, not things. I know, but I don't know how to be a father yet. So let me start here. What was she supposed to say? She took the car seat. Over the next weeks, Ricardo became a ghost in her life. Never intrusive, never demanding, just present. Paid her rent without asking. Sent groceries. Left toys for Sophia on the doorstep. Never asked to see her. Never pushed. Then Sophia got sick. A cold turned into an ear infection, turned into a 104-degree fever. Jessica called 911 at 2 a.m., terrified, holding her screaming baby. Ricardo was at the hospital when they arrived, pacing the waiting room like he might tear it apart. Is she okay? He demanded. I don't know. They're examining her. The doctor came out. Severe ear infection. We're admitting her for 4 antibiotics. She should be fine. Can I see her? Of course. Ricardo moved to follow. The doctor looked at him questioningly. He's her father, Jessica said quietly. Ricardo's expression nearly broke her. They followed the doctor to a room where Sophia lay in a crib too big for her, crying weakly, face flushed. Ricardo froze in the doorway. She's so small. She's 3 months old, actually 4.5 pounds bigger than when she was born. Jessica picked Sophia up. She settled against Jessica's chest, whimpering. You can touch her, Jessica said. She won't break. I might. But he stepped closer, reached out and touched Sophia's dark hair, his hair. Sophia turned her head, and her eyes opened. Ricardo's eyes, dark and deep. Father and daughter looked at each other for the first time, really looked, and Jessica watched something fundamental shift in Ricardo's face. Sophia, he whispered. That's perfect. She's perfect, and I'm the biggest fool alive. Yes, you are. He laughed, choked and broken. Can I hold her? This was a line they couldn't uncross. Once he held her, there was no going back. Please, he whispered, let me hold my daughter. Jessica showed him how to support Sophia's head, how to keep her secure. He held her like she was made of glass, barely breathing. And Sophia reached up one tiny hand and grabbed his finger. Ricardo shattered, just broke completely, standing in that hospital room, crying while their daughter gripped his finger like he was her whole world. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. But I swear on my life, I will never leave you again. Never. Sophia made a small sound, and Ricardo fell completely in love. He stayed all night, slept in the chair, got up every time Sophia fussed, even though he didn't know what to do, just talking to her softly in Italian until she settled. In the morning, when Sophia was discharged, Ricardo drove them home in a normal car with a properly installed car seat. He carried Sophia like she might disappear if he let go. "I need you both safe," he said, standing in Jessica's living room, still holding their daughter. "My enemies are still out there, and I can't risk you again. So what are you saying? Marry me." The words hung between them. "Let me give Sophia my name, my protection. Let me be the father and partner I should have been. You can't propose just because you're scared. I'm proposing because I love you. Because I've loved you since that first night. Because I want to wake up every morning watching Sophia grow. Because I want us to be a family. You left us when we needed you most. How do I trust you won't do it again? You don't. Complete honesty. You can't trust it because I haven't earned it. But marry me anyway. Let me spend every day proving I'm worth a risk." Jessica looked at him, this dangerous man holding their daughter like she was his salvation. This monster who cried over car seats. This coward finally brave enough to ask. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said. "If you're still here, still trying, ask me then." He smiled. "I can work with that." He stayed. Not perfectly. He still disappeared for days to handle business he wouldn't explain. Still lived in a world of violence Jessica couldn't fully understand. But he came home, showed up for appointments and midnight feedings, learned to change diapers and make bottles and read board books in his accented voice. Slowly, carefully, they built something new. 6 months later, while they sat exhausted on the floor surrounded by toys, Sophia teething and fussy, Ricardo said, "Jessica Phillips, will you marry me?" Jessica looked at Sophia, 10 months old now, crawling toward her father with absolute trust. Looked at Ricardo, dark circles under his eyes, spit up on his expensive shirt, completely in love with their messy life. Yes, they married at the courthouse. Dino and Sophia as witnesses. No big wedding, no dramatics, just two broken people promising to try. But Jessica had learned something in those months, something important. She'd learned that Ricardo's world wasn't just dangerous, it was exploitable. That the same networks he used for crime could be used for information. That the same violence he dealt in could be turned against him. And when the Volkovs came, because they always came, Jessica was ready. It happened on a Tuesday. Sophia was 18 months old, playing with blocks in her living room. The windows exploded inward in a shower of glass. 3 men in black tactical gear burst through, weapons raised. Jessica grabbed Sophia and dove behind the couch, heart hammering. But she wasn't the terrified nursing student anymore. She was Ricardo Mazzani's wife, and she'd spent the last year learning everything his world had to teach. The first man rounded the couch. Jessica shot him in the knee with the Glock she'd been carrying for 6 months. He went down screaming. The second man aimed at her. She shot him in the shoulder before he could fire. The third man grabbed Sophia. Everything in Jessica's world narrowed to that single moment. Her daughter screaming in a stranger's arms. The gun in her hand. The choice between safety and action. She shot him through the hand, holding Sophia. He dropped her. Jessica caught her daughter and put 2 more rounds center mass before he could recover. Then it was over. 3 men down. Sophia crying but unhurt. And Jessica standing there covered in her daughter's blood and her own fury, realizing she'd become exactly what Ricardo had feared. A weapon. When Ricardo arrived, alerted by the security she'd insisted he install after the wedding, he found her sitting calmly in the wreckage, Sophia in her arms, bodies cooling around her. "Jessica," he breathed. "What did you do?" "I protected our daughter." She looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. "What you should have done from the beginning." That's when everything changed. Ricardo had always underestimated her, saw her as someone to protect, someone fragile who needed shielding from his world. But sitting there in the ruins of their living room, he finally saw the truth. Jessica Phillips wasn't a victim. She was a survivor who'd learned to fight back. "Who trained you?" he asked quietly. "Dino." She smiled without humor. "Turns out your brother thinks I have potential." And he was right. Over the next months, the dynamic shifted. Jessica wasn't just Ricardo's wife anymore. She became his partner, his equal. The woman who walked into meetings with Russian mobsters and Italian dons and made them see her as something more than decoration. She learned the business, the networks, the power structures, and she used that knowledge. The Volkovs kept coming, but Jessica was always 3 steps ahead. She turned their own people, exposed their operations, built a network of information that made Ricardo's empire stronger and her family safer. And when Dmitry Volkov himself finally cornered her in a parking garage, the same man who'd threatened her 2 years earlier, Jessica didn't run. She smiled. "Remember me?" she asked. Recognition dawned in his eyes. The pregnant girl. The woman who's about to end you. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. "I have every transaction you've made in the last 3 years. Every dirty cop. Every political connection. Everybody. And I've already sent copies to the FBI, the media, and 3 different crime families who'd love to know you've been skimming." Dimitri's face went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Jessica stepped closer. "You threatened my family. You made me a target. And you thought I'd just hide and hope Ricardo protected me. But I'm not that woman anymore. I'm the woman who protects herself." She left him there in that parking garage, knowing his empire would crumble within days. Knowing she'd won not through violence, but through something Ricardo had never fully mastered. Information. That night, when Ricardo asked her what happened, Jessica told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. Really laughed, for the first time since she'd known him. "I abandoned you because I thought you needed protection," he said, pulling her close. "I'm an idiot. You never needed protecting. You needed someone to stop underestimating you." "Yes," Jessica agreed. "You are an idiot. But you're my idiot. Sophia is too now. She has Ricardo's eyes and Jessica's stubbornness and absolutely no idea how close she came to growing up without a father." Sometimes Jessica watches Ricardo play with her, building block towers and making her shriek with laughter, and marvels at how much has changed. The man who abandoned her became the father who wakes at 5 a.m. to make pancakes. The woman who could barely afford rent became the queen who runs an empire alongside her king. And the baby born too early into a world too hard became the reason they both learned to be better. But Jessica keeps the gun, keeps the flash drives, keeps every piece of information she's gathered about Ricardo's world and the people in it. Because she's learned the most important lesson of all. Love isn't enough. Protection isn't enough. Trust has to be earned, and power has to be taken. And she's done being anything less than powerful. And that's how a nursing student became a queen. If you made it this far, you just experienced the story of how Jessica Phillips transformed from abandoned and pregnant to the most dangerous woman in Chicago's underworld. And I need to know, what was your favorite moment? Did you see Jessica's transformation coming? Do you think Ricardo deserved that second chance? Tell me in the comments right now. And drop your city and state. I love seeing where a community is watching from. If this story gave you chills, made you want to stand up and cheer, or had you rooting for a woman who refused to stay a victim, you need to subscribe because next week's story is about a woman who discovered her husband's secret family and burned his entire life to the ground. Hit that like button, share this with someone who loves stories about women who fight back, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, the people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest weapon of all, the element of surprise. Thank you.